I came back Tuesday after heading IRI's delegation for the second round. I also was in Ukraine during the first round with a German Marshall Fund study group. We were not official observers for that round. We went down to Crimea during the weekend of that first round. So I am able to offer a perspective on both the first and second rounds on how they went. And I have to say, if you've seen the IRI statement that was issued following this past Sunday's vote, that our sense is the election went very well. It was conducted in a fashion that met international standards, and that it is a further reflection of Ukraine's ability to conduct free and fair elections. As Ambassador Shamshur said, this was the third one in a row. You could actually almost say the fourth if you count the rerun in December of 2004. And I think it is important to remember that the parliamentary elections in 2006 and 2007 also were conducted in a similar fashion. One of the things that impressed me was the turnout for both rounds, 67% in the first, 68% in the second. It's a little lower than the 2004 election, but for those of us who were there, and some of us sitting at the table were, it was cold. It was very cold. I really hope Ukraine holds its next election in a nicer time of season, because I vowed I would not go back to observe another election until they do. As Judge Fouté said, they're really, at least to us, and I don't want to speak for others, and Oris can certainly talk about his group, there were no systemic abuses, there were no systemic fraud in the election, and so based on that, any violations that did seem to occur were probably a wash at the end of the day. The election turned out to be closer than at least polls showed, including polls from the two camps as late as Friday. In Kiev, I saw polls from the two camps, excuse me, that from the Yanukovych side showed him leading from 10 to 15%. There were polls in the Tymoshenko camp that showed her losing as much as 10 to 12%. And the fact that the election turned out to be a gap of just 3.5%, I think came as a surprise to many in the Tymoshenko camp. How did that number get smaller? I think it's a few things. Exit polls showed that voters who in the first round had voted for Yushchenko, for Yatsenyuk, more than likely voted for Tymoshenko, number one. Number two, the Tihipko vote is largely split. So that turned out to be a wash. But number three, and the judge touched on this, the expectations were that the vote for none of the above was going to be somewhere in the area of 10%. And so it actually wound up being significantly less. Sorry, I got a Kiev cold. And I think the reason for that is it's hard to go out and vote in those weather conditions, to vote for neither. And so if you're going to get out of bed and go vote, you'd rather, even if you have to hold your nose, go vote for somebody. And so I think that had an effect. Sorry. Why did she lose, though? First, her responsibility for being prime minister, with an economy dropping 15%. But also, I would argue, it was the Yushchenko effect. And by that, I mean the nasty attacks, and I would say they were nasty attacks coming from the president. The president, ironically, was doing Yanukovych's dirty work for him. The irony of this is Yanukovych and Yushchenko, you all know the history of 2004, but Yanukovych didn't have to do very much, which I'm sure he was very thankful for. When I was there, soon after arriving, we heard from several reliable sources that there was a plan in the Tymoshenko camp to boycott some of the polling stations. I'm getting medication from all different directions. All right, thank you. I'll compare and contrast. Thank you. And what this meant was that with the two-thirds requirement, there was the ability of one camp to boycott and thereby deprive a polling station of the two-thirds quorum that was necessary. Two-thirds works when you have 18 candidates, because you'll have those candidates show up and you'll have a quorum. But two-thirds doesn't work when you have just two candidates, because then one camp has the ability to nullify the results. Had this gone forward, you would have had the ability of one camp, in this case the Tymoshenko camp, to have invalidated the results in polling stations in the East and basically disenfranchising lots of voters. That's why the Rada went ahead and did this. It is less than ideal. I completely agree with the judge to change the rules in the middle of the game. And that was the message when Orris was there from the OSCE, ODIHR, and the Parliamentary Assembly from the first round. Don't amend the rules. Don't change the rules in the middle of the game. But I have to say that based on talking to the ODIHR mission, including Heidi Tagliavini, who I think is one of the finest diplomats in the international community, they had sympathy for the change that was made by the Rada because they and members of the Rada and the various camps discovered that this two-thirds requirement was a problem in the second round. And so they did not, at least Tagliavini and ODIHR did not criticize it. But it underscores the need for Ukraine's political leaders and for the Rada to undertake serious electoral reform as soon as possible. Finally, the reaction of the West. There has been some criticism about the phone calls that have been made, including President Obama's call to Yanukovych. I frankly don't think there was any choice. Tymoshenko has every right to challenge the results. She can take to the court, but at the same time, because of the assessments and observations of the international community giving the election a thumbs up, there aren't many grounds for the international community to come in and protest. And so based on that, I think it would have been a mistake, in fact, had the president not placed a phone call and had he been the last one to congratulate Yanukovych. Tymoshenko's silence over the first few days after the election, I think, was based on the fact that she was trying to figure out what to do, a logical thing to do. And I think, as I said to someone before the conference started, I think she was a little surprised at how close it really was. And so she had to recalculate how she was going to respond and react. So hats off to Ukraine for conducting another decent election. And I completely agree with the ambassador when he said we have to get over our Ukraine fatigue. We have to engage. We have no choice. Ukraine is a country of vital importance. It's a key piece of the puzzle for completing the vision of a Europe whole, free, and at peace. And so I hope that we will see the West extend a hand to Ukraine, to Yanukovych, to Tymoshenko in whatever capacity she will continue to serve, and that we will try to bring Ukraine further into the Euro-Atlantic community. Thanks.